Yeah, to set a little bit of background context for what I'm going to be talking about. So, yeah, my academic background is ecology, and ecology is the science of interconnection and interconnection of living systems. And I think psychedelics, they might seem sort of very much kind of their own thing, but one of the core facets of the psychedelic experience is interconnection. So they allow this direct experiential comprehension of this interconnection as opposed to just an intellectual understanding. So we are in the 6th great mass extinction of life on planet Earth. The loss of species, of ecological degradation is unprecedented and accelerating, and 1 million or so species are threatened with extinction. The systems on which all life on Earth depend are being degraded and destroyed. And the essential sort of conclusion from this report is, without a sort of global mobilization, an ecological mobilization on the scale of World War II, we are in deep, deep trouble. A few interesting, more positive findings from this report. And one of the interesting things was that lands inhabited and sort of under the control of indigenous people were some of the only lands on Earth not undergoing ecological degradation of any kind. And this is really interesting in terms, these indigenous groups live very nature-connected lives. They're, of all the human beings alive, they have the strongest, deepest connection to their land. And it seems that connection, as I'll sort of discuss, fosters this care and this concern. These indigenous groups tend to sort of view themselves as part of their environment and their habitat. So why would you destroy your habitat when it's sort of going to destroy you? Some of these groups use psychedelics. Not all of them, though. But that's sort of part of their practices in some parts of the world. So we are living increasingly disconnected lives. And this disconnection is occurring, manifesting on different scales. So disconnection from our core selves, disconnection from other people, disconnection from nature. This disconnection began when we started farming, in terms of the disconnection from nature. As soon as we moved away from being hunter-gatherers and became farmers, it fundamentally changed the way we interacted with and viewed nature. Nature became a resource to be tamed and controlled. Certain species were prioritized over the existence of others. And in the wake of that, we started having these domesticated plants and animals fundamentally changed our species' destiny and domesticated us. It was a two-way domestication. We started living for the first time in large groups in cities, and that planted the seeds of our civilization as we know it today. But with that came increased urbanization, and more people were moving, becoming more sort of cut off from nature. But the most recent form of disconnection that seems to have occurred through technology, and particularly sort of like television and more recently the internet. And it seems, our screen addictions kind of render us prisoners of the paradox that the more we watch, the less we see of the world around us.
Spirituality is about connecting to something bigger, something greater than the self. And that can obviously be a perceived transpersonal spiritual essence or like higher power God. But it could also just be, like nature and the universe. And I think, and the thing I kind of like about that is it's kind of like a grounded, tangible form of spirituality as well. It's not, you're not away with the fairies somewhere else. It's like here, now, earthy and grounded and like, and visceral and important. It's given literally like we come from the earth and we go back to the earth, and like we're on this crazy planet right now at this time, like with this like level of sentience, consciousness, and like it's just absolutely nuts. I mean, like, just that, like the mystery itself. You don't need to potentially, I don't think, subscribe to anything more beyond just than what's happening right now. It's bonkers. So yeah, so, you know, but I don't want to like, I feel like, yeah, that's what's quite interesting to me about nature connectedness actually, is because, you know, part of it is kind of keying into one's awareness of being part of a larger interconnected web of life. And like, I guess for some people that might sound a bit hippie-ish and new agey, but it's really not. I mean, that is a basic bedrock tenet of the science of ecology, you know, which is all about the interconnection of living systems. You know, of course we are part of one interconnected system. It can't exist any other way. That is the fundamental sort of like truth of kind of what's going on. And then, you know, like we've evolved these egos, you know, over the course of evolution, and they, you know, they're concocted by the brain, and they make us feel separate and individual. And you know, there's good reasons for that. I mean, that's, you know, so we kind of like will survive and we'll pass on our genes, and you know, like, and it allows us lots of great opportunities and perspectives that come with that. But yeah, it's good to be reminded that, you know, however tangible that feeling of separation and individuality is, I think the closer, more objective truth is that, you know, we are just, you know, we're, you know, each of us are a single being that's like wedded in an interconnected mesh of other beings. And like, yeah, and I think as well, just extrapolating from that, like we're living in a very disconnected time, psychologically, not just from nature. I feel like our society, our civilization, the ideals of our civilization, you know, could be considered to be, well, are like pretty individualistic, pretty materialistic, competitive in some sense. And it's like those things are like what they could be considered to be inversely related to connectedness or connection. And I'm speaking now more widely than nature. I mean connectedness to self, connectedness to others, and connectedness to nature, the world, the universe. And, you know, so, and I feel like I don't want to like oversimplify and generalize too much, but I really do feel that like deep disconnection lies at the root of the mental health crisis we're going through, also the environmental crisis we're going through, and it's unfortunately woven into the very fabric of our societal ideals. And yeah, so that's a major bummer, you know, for all the definite good. And, you know, I'm not like, you know, I'm not saying tear down the, you know, society and like anarchy on the streets right now. Like, you know, I'm grateful for all the various, you know, we're all living longer, we have more opportunities, we have material comforts, you know, access to medicines, all this stuff, and it's fantastic. And, you know, we're having this conversation now through this technology. It's great. But it's like, yeah, it seems that our kind of, I guess, existential psychological needs from our initial kind of, you know, how we used to exist as hunter-gatherer community. You know, we've still got the brains of our Paleolithic ancestors from 200,000 years ago. Only we're like in this like we're kind of, what was it? There's a great quote from the late E.O. Wilson, is this evolutionary biologist, something along the lines of like, we have the brains of our Paleolithic ancestors, we have medieval institutions and godlike
technology. Yeah,
and it's like, oh god, it's like the trinity of those things is like, it's a volatile old cocktail.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would totally agree with what you said regarding sort of like you know, spirituality, or define it. For me, it's always felt like it's really an internal, like a sense of alignment. It's and so you can kind of feel when you are off, you know, when you are sort of acting toxic and being a shit, and you know, just you know, you can feel that way, and you can also feel when you're aligned, and whatever that is that you're aligned with, I think is up to the individual. And
yes.
Of the 17 of 20 people who responded to some degree to the psilocybin therapy, all independently described this feeling of disconnection as being part of their depression. And psilocybin worked in part by reconnecting them to themselves, to others, to the world at large. And it was interesting that none of these people undergoing the psilocybin therapy, none of them prior to their psilocybin session described this feeling of, noticing or acknowledging they were disconnected from nature. It was only afterwards, during and afterwards, they sort of, re-remembered the importance of that connection.
So this reconnection to nature, this is so profound and important. And people who don't experience this, they are truly missing out, from my own experience. I really wouldn't want to not have it in my life. It's such a beautiful, nourishing connection.
In terms of what's going on with regards psychedelics making us more connected to nature, it seems to it's involved with the ego, the sense of self. So here, this image, which is part of the Imperial Beckley Research Program, is showing a sort of conceptualized representation of what's going on in the brain in terms of interconnection. So under an MRI. So under a high dose of psilocybin, your default mode network, which is considered to be a kind of fundamental neural component of the ego or the sense of self, is kind of relaxed and sort of dissolves. And that in turn facilitates this kind of expanded state of self-nature overlap. So it's worth kind of thinking about that psychedelics are agents of connection on all levels. On the level of the neuron, they induce synaptic and neurite formation. At the level of the brain, they increase global connectivity and communication of different parts of the brain. At the level of the self and interpersonally, they facilitate connection, as the depression research alludes to. They also increase connection to nature and the universe at large.
So you are zooming out of your current stress. When you dissociate from whatever causes you stress, you get back into your heart and you look at things from a distance, which gives you a new perspective, new insights. So it is a very simple method to help your nervous system to regulate itself. Go out into nature, connect with trees, listen to the sounds. Let your hands feel and be present. Don't ruminate on your life's problems. Try to really be in the moment and enjoy what you see. Especially now, everything is so green and beautiful. And it's so harmonious. And you can just be in this natural environment. So having reconnected with nature, it gives me this inner peace and joy, which is a right hemisphere state.
Humor in adults is processed on the right side of the brain. The baby becomes securely attached to the psychobiologically attuned caregiver who minimizes negative affect, who downregulates negative affect by soothing the baby and maximizes positive affect, joy in the play state. For a long time, we thought that essentially the bond was there because she was down-regulating emotion. But we now know that as equally important is the mother's ability to upregulate joy states.
And you can experience that in nature, connecting with Mother Earth.
Of brain-to-brain quiet love, again, the body-to-body contact and the kiss of a loving mother triggers immediate neuroplasticity in and development. So here what you would see is oxytocin is being triggered in this baby's brain. That corticosteroids are dropping in the baby's brain here. That dopamine is being promoted here also as a result of this loving contact.
I believe, from what I experience, that you can get that same result from reconnecting with Mother Nature. She's a mother too. And she loves. You can just go outside, be, listen, and feel it. Get your feet on the ground and open your heart. You can breathe in deeply and breathe out. And this can be part of your daily meditation. Make it a practice every morning or every evening. And it will definitely nourish you in some way. However, since most of us are so disconnected from nature,
Depression is on the rise and considered by the World Health Organization the #1 form of disability worldwide. So there's the interpersonal disconnection fueling the mental health crisis, and the disconnection from nature is fueling the environmental crisis.
I think it's really fascinating from the work that has been done and is being done now, is that at least when it comes to something like psilocybin, evoking changes in people's relationship to nature or connectedness to nature, it doesn't matter that people are being administered psilocybin in otherwise cozy, to be fair, but concrete boxes. It doesn't even, people are being given synthetic psilocybin, not from obviously the fungus, lab-made psilocybin. Not that I really think that makes any difference, but that's just putting it out there. They're being given synthetic psilocybin in a kind of cozy concrete sort of clinical box environment, but it doesn't seem to matter. As in, even when you're giving people that psilocybin, obviously when you're giving it to them, there's not any pre-flight plan where you're like, oh, this is going to affect or influence your relationship with nature. Like that's not on the pre-flight agenda, at all. So it's being kind of given blindly, if you can view it like that. Like, it's not being primed in any way, and obviously, bar other humans, there's not really any nature to speak of. And like, we can get all philosophical and go, well, everything's nature. And it's like, yeah, I get that argument, but I mean like, yeah, life, living,
lush green things,
yeah. So that to me is really interesting, because I've kind of scoured the scientific literature on other nature connectedness enhancing interventions. A review paper was published just a few months ago, and these are things like residential stays in national parks, nature-based educational and engagement programs, things like this, and and they can produce like relatively sustained shifts in nature connectedness. Variable in their effectiveness, and they do take time and resources, and the more time and resources they take, the kind of longer the boost in nature connectedness you get. But what was kind of like, I thought, quite interesting from this this review paper, having looked at all the studies myself, so I was like, okay, good, I'm on the right lines. Nobody's like assessed these interventions in terms of lasting effects beyond 3 months. Like 3 months is the upper limit. Now I'm a relative newcomer to this field through the kind of psychedelic on-ramp, but my thinking was like, you know, kind of what's the point? I mean, 3 months or less is small freaking potatoes across a human lifespan.
Yeah.
You know, can we not do a bit better? Can we not be a bit more ambitious than that? And the fact that psilocybin can elicit these changes in people's relationship to nature when it's given in a context that's kind of like outside of nature is really quite special and unusual, because all those nature connectedness interventions I just mentioned, unsurprisingly, nature is very much the key focus, as you kind of would expect. But psilocybin doesn't even need that. And it seems that, you know, even a single experience can potentially elicit changes, and from some preliminary work, it seems like the changes persist as well. They don't sort of fade, you know, within that 3-month time window. So yeah, that makes me think, well, that's really interesting. But what happens if we actually used something like psilocybin as an applied nature connection in enhancing agent? So, you know, it's kind of part of a nature-based approach, setting context with nature-based stuff, kind of themes and content involved. And so it seems like, yeah, there's great untapped potential yet to be kind of explored there, I think.
Let's zoom out for a second. So when astronauts view planet Earth from space, they tend to undergo a profound cognitive shift, a life-changing shift. And this sort of, this is known as the overview effect. It can be summarized as truly transformative experiences involving senses of wonder and awe, unity with nature, transcendence and universal brotherhood. And the astronauts that have this experience, they tend to sort of become much more ecologically aware and conscious. They sort of behold the incredible beauty of planet Earth, but also its fragility. As Belander said of this photograph, like, we came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing is we discovered the Earth. Sort of a nice, interesting sort of psychedelic add-on to this story. Then Mary Praxter and writer Stuart Brand had some LSD in the winter of 1965 in San Francisco on a rooftop, and he sort of felt what he could almost perceive as the curvature of the Earth. And he sort of, it made him wonder in turn, why had no one taken a photograph from the Earth from space yet when we'd been to space? It seemed like, a logical thing to do. So he came down off his trip, but the idea stayed, and he sort of embarked on this campaign, sending badges to NASA and Congress, printed with, why haven't we seen a whole photograph of the Earth from space yet? And he felt that the release of such a photograph, this photograph, would help facilitate people to live more conscientiously with the planet. The concept of biophilia, which can be considered the innate fondness we have for other life forms, the connections that human beings subconsciously seek with the rest of life. So, nature connection. Self-identification with nature, or nature-relatedness. There's a substantial body of research now to show that what degree of nature connection is correlated with things like decreased anxiety, increased vitality, life satisfaction, happiness, and improved psychological well-being at the trait and state level. So it's a very important health predictor, indeed, on the individual level. But also, importantly, is that one's degree of nature connection is perhaps the single strongest psychological predictor of pro-environmental behavior. And it's interesting, so environmental knowledge, simply knowing about nature, is a much less strong predictor of this pro-environmental awareness. So that sort of emotional connection to one's environment, to nature, seems a very important part of the motivation for proactive behavior. So, wouldn't it be good if we had tools that could induce the overview effect without the need of going to space, enhance our biophilia, and deepen our nature-relatedness. So, no prizes for guessing what those tools might be. They are, of course, the psychedelics, which have been used by some cultures for centuries or millennia. It's interesting to note that the great chemist, discoverer of LSD, inventor of LSD, Albert Hofmann, described profound feelings, like mystical feelings of nature connection in his younger days, like unity and oneness with nature. And when he subsequently experienced LSD, he described it as sort of producing this very identical state of connection and unity with the natural world. So this is a sort of testimonial from one of the people in the psilocybin depression study. And yeah, like Google Earth, I had zoomed out. For weeks afterwards, I was absolutely connected to myself, to every living thing, to the universe. And so this is nice. This is kind of insinuating that without the sort of the great cost and sort of rigmarole of going to space, that psychedelics can offer an alternative, perhaps more accessible route to a very similar perspective.
For me, it was the same. Working with Amanita muscaria, it has brought back this nature connection, which I had with the forest. Riding bareback on a horse, just listening to the sounds. This was my beloved Jamaica. And I'm so grateful that I had this wonderful opportunity to look after her and be with her in the forest together. It was a beautiful bond. One of my most cherished teenage memories. And it gave me that beautiful inner peace. That was my teenage meditation, which pulled me through the struggling years of puberty. In 2016, I had a spontaneous, non-ordinary state of consciousness, close to the Glastonbury Tor, just having a break in nature, lying in the grass. It was so profound, when all of a sudden I was overcome with that sense of oneness. I felt unconditionally loved and cradled by Mother Earth, and I was the one loving Mother Earth. Amazing. I will never forget that. Since then, that deep connection has been rekindled a few years later. It was that mushroom, Amanita muscaria, which inspired me. It was like an inner pull to go back into the forest just for a walk. And now I do this on an almost daily basis. It has so reconnected me to Mother Earth. And the Celtic knot mandalas I create, they are mostly inspired by what I observe in nature. The colors and the shapes. So having reconnected to Mother Earth really also inspires creativity to flow. So I see this as a chance, and why everybody, not just depressed people in clinical settings, but more general for all who want to try it. They should have the opportunity and the access to these substances, of course used responsibly. I see it as a chance to turn this around and hopefully prevent that complete destruction of our beautiful planet Earth.